Good morning, everybody. My name is Farr. I am Senior Director of Methodology at Samsung Ads. And I recently attended a lunch and learn hosted by ARF, more specifically the Women Analytics Young Pros host a luncheon called Sharpen Your Skillset for Success. I actually walked away with this with quite a few notes, so I thought it would be best to sort of compile these into a video and sort of share it with the rest of you. These are my sort of takeaway points that I definitely grew through. There was a really great analogy that was thrown around out there. One of the major conflicts of analytics, specifically analytics in the advertising industry, is that there is this very strong left brain versus right brain dynamic that you really can't bring into context until you start looking heavily at things like data. And with advertising in particular and with advertising data, it really was interestingly portrayed the difference between leaves and flowers, form versus function. I really liked that, and that how you have to have both really to go forward and really add value to the advertising industry. Is you don't just collect data. There's a creative element in that. There is storytelling. Sometimes having a left brain brand is the right decision, and sometimes it's not. And there's difference between storytelling and data versus action. It's very interesting to have that. You should always sort of start with a problem and sort of guide yourself towards a solution. Another really interesting analogy that I heard was what I interpreted it as was like really storytelling is fishing in a lake. It's scenic, it's thematic, and what you're doing is you're fishing and you're starting at the context at the surface of the lake, and you're really dropping your lines down to get to the fish or to the point, right? There's no point having all of this context or all of this data or all of this thing if you don't get to a point that actually really satisfies you. So when you're fishing, the purpose is to catch fish, but you can do it in a very beautiful and interesting way. You don't just have to go collect data. You don't just have to collect data points and get to a KPI. The KPI has to really service you. One of the other things that was really interesting was really, how do you develop people underneath you? And I kind of struggled with this a lot in my career. I've been managing people since 2005. So 20 years of managing people and mentoring them. And sometimes you learn this from failure. You really have to embrace that you're really looking at the skill sets of these people and where you can develop them. But you only control the external part of that equation. The internal part, they hold themselves, and sometimes you can sort of guide people on a path and they'll say, you know what, I actually don't want to do that as my career. And I actually faced that in my career. I was working for a great company and they said, we'd love to put you into a sales role. And I did it for a matter of months, but it really wasn't me. It wasn't necessarily that I was a bad salesperson or anything like that. It was just, I didn't really understand where I added value in the organization. And I think that's really important, that when you're mentoring people, just understand that they're holding the other side of that equation. I think it was interesting to see what happened when they did the panel. I think it's great that they called out that, you shouldn't work in a silo. It's very tempting to do that, especially in the analytics team, but you really want to cross-train and expand your skill set outside of that silo because so much of the business operates outside of that. I think it's really great that the panel sort of discussed, you can slap together Tableau, you can make your BI tools functional, but the purpose of BI is really to drive that sales call, drive revenue into the business. I think it was great that active listening was called out. It is quite active listening, or the way I like to phrase it also is observing, is really the most important skill. You can learn the most from observing. There is also no value in being in a meeting or whatever if you're not present, you're not listening. I think it was great that it was mentioned about agility, the concept of failing fast, but it also got challenged of learning fast. I think that's a skill set that many people lack. They're quite happy to do their job and not experience the discomfort of failing and learning. I think it was really interesting that there's talk of this balance between the hard and soft skill sets, with machine learning taking over a lot of the data are all the hard skill sets going forward, and the presence of AI going from machine learning to AI is now taking over that soft skill set. The human function effectively is going to be the balance between those two. We kind of have tools to start covering both those areas on both sides of the equation. We've got ML tools that effectively do art and writing and stuff like that, and we've got ML tools that do advanced analysis. So you really have to bridge between those to be successful in your career. I think it's great that there is this discussion of shifting jobs, and they're saying that it's almost like a Schmidt trigger, like your next job you're going to be employed for. There is like a 6-month learning curve, but you can kind of do a big chunk of that 6-month learning curve before the job. And it's almost more rewarding because you have the ability to shift that to different positions in your career. So I think that was really, really well pointed out, that the 6-month period can either exist in your new job or it can exist in your current job. The advantage of keeping your current job is you could get to the end of 6 months of learning and go, I don't really want to do that anymore. There was a lot of talk about self-promotion, obviously. I think it's self-promotion is I've mentored a lot of women, especially in the tech space, and self-promotion, I think, is the hardest thing, to be in that room, to speak up, to really show your work out to people. I thought it was really interesting the way they put it out there. It's something that I've always really argued for my teams to do, is self-document, and then broadcast the information. Get everything lined up and then publish effectively. Self-document things, make it interesting for people, and then publish that to the, whoever needs to see it or hear it, right? It'll be interesting to someone, but you have to really document it and reach them in a language that they understand. The other thing about self-promotion was open lines of communication, build connections. Lots of people out there are willing to help you. You need to reach out to them. I have had recent experiences through both my tattoo and even right now just talking to you guys, where I was too scared to do these things. I was too scared to reach out to people. And the reality of the matter is there are people out there just willing to help you. On the topic of mentors and mentorship, very, very interesting way that they presented this, that you use mentors on your weakness, your skills that you want to improve. But it's great that they pointed out that a mentor doesn't actually have to be someone that's alive. I've actually know of people that have had fictional mentors, cartoon characters, whatever. It's up to you what it comes down to the observance that I said earlier. You need to observe stuff, and when you're observing stuff, you're actually being mentored by it. You're being sort of sculpted in a way. And so, you need diverse perspectives of what's going on. These people don't need to be alive. It's great if they are, because you can ask them questions, but with the future of AI, chatbots, etc., maybe that's an interesting dynamic where people getting diverse perspectives from things like AI. I don't know. When they're talking specifically about the topic of sharpening your skill set and just sort of closing out the whole subject, it was really interesting to say, some people said, be open to ideas, be open to new ideas. I think that's really important. You will form your own solutions in your head, but if you have limited information to build those on, you kind of need new ideas. Dedicate time to learn. This comes back to, you don't know what you don't know. So if you're learning, you're growing. Take opportunity to say yes, even if you're not ready. I think this one's most important, because sometimes we get presented with opportunities and we freak out. I can think of a dozen opportunities that, in my career, where I just sat down and freaked out about something and not jumped on board. And then dozens of opportunities where I did jump on board, and it was such an amazing experience. Currently living in the US, this was one of those opportunities that was presented to me in 2013, and I could have easily gone, you know what, I'm very happy with my career, I'm very happy with my lifestyle, very happy with my job, but I just chose to give it all up, move to the US, and honestly, it's been an amazing experience. So say yes, even if you're not ready. Another good point was to call your boundaries up front. Figure out what your boundaries are and just call them up front. If you're working as a data analyst and you don't want to talk to people and you don't want to talk to a camera, then say you don't want to do that. There is so much opportunity out there for people that if that's your boundary, you're perfectly allowed to do it, and there is so much work for you. You know, I was a young engineer once, and I didn't like talking to people. I didn't like dealing with people. I didn't like managing people. I just wanted to code in a back room. In fact, I love server rooms. I loved pump stations, water treatment plants. There was no one there. You know, automated factories. It was great. I could just live and learn in my element, and you know, that was me at that point in time. That was my boundary. State your non-negotiables, same thing, really. You really need to, one of the topics was about, it feels intimidating, but sometimes making that leap is totally worth it. The fear of the intimidation was really inside your head. It's not in the external world. The payoff is generally greatest for those things that you fear. So if it feels intimidating, good. That usually means that there's massive amounts of growth there for you. Another good point was having the conversations. Reaching out to your leaders, reaching out to people that you know, just have conversations with people of like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And I think it was just in general a really, really, really great lunch and learn. There was a lot packed in there. These are just my notes. I think it was, especially for the women in analytics, it was amazing. I think that they did a great job. The young pros, they did a great job. This is how the industry grows. So I'd just like to thank the ARF, and this is my summary of that lunch and learn. Thank you.